Let me tell you a story. It's one from my past. For unlike my life, I'd like this story to last. It takes place a long time ago, long before you were born. And it's gonna sound a little far-fetched, I must warn. I think you'll like this part. It's actually quite romantic. Our story begins in the great blue Atlantic. There was a blanket of fog as thick as pea soup. Wait, no, that's not right. There was a blanket of fog, it was thicker than beef stew, and it was impossible to see further than 10 feet in front of you. Waves crashed upon the beach. Well, you get the gist. But suddenly, a figure appeared in the mist. The man carried a leather briefcase and wore nothing but tweed, and a thick pair of glasses so that he could read. As he walked from the sea, he took a deep sigh, and an undeniable twinkle could be seen in his eye. For days the man walked without stopping at all until finally he reached the steps of a classroom building, Hanscom Hall. He walked right in. "Hey, Stanley," he said. But Stanley just furrowed his brow and shook his head. For who this man was, Stanley had no earthly clue. One thing was certain, it was not a face he knew. The man walked straight into a classroom. I think it was number 207. Or wait, well maybe it was 211. No, that can't be right. 211 was the room where they taught biology. Psychology? Well, goodness, I hope it wasn't astrology. Well, anyway, he looked to his teaching assistant. "Hi, Stephanie," he declared. But Stephanie just sat there indifferently and stared. Before long, the strange man went in front of the room and started teaching. He was very enthusiastic, seemed engaged in the students he was reaching. But just at that moment when he'd gotten into his teaching plan, who should walk by but our protagonist, Stan. Stan peered through the window on the heavy oak door, and what he saw nearly made his jaw hit the floor. For the classroom was empty, it had no students in it, but this jackass had been standing there teaching his class for over a minute. Stanley was baffled, he was bewildered and bamboozled at such a bizarre sight. He couldn't figure this out, try as he might. So down to the faculty room he rushed with a shake and a shudder, where he found a teacher named Jay using a paper cutter. "What is it, Stanley?" asked Jay contemptuously, to which he replied, "There's a man teaching a class in 207, but the classroom is empty." "For heaven's sake, Stanley, let the man do his job," said Jay, an order which, of course, Stanley wouldn't obey. Now our oddball professor was walking down the hall, when right there in front of him, he saw a picture hung up on the wall. "Have you seen this man?" the poster warned, just below a photograph of a man eating corn. Stick with me, because here's where it gets quirky. When the man spun back around, the one poster had turned to 30. Not long after that, a young man walked by holding a chair, but he dismissed what he saw with not so much as a care. Just after that, Stanley came over looking particularly upset, and the professor smiled at him kindly, as you do when you've already met. "You're not fooling anyone," said Stanley in a firm accost. But the professor just started rattling on about Robert Frost. Our friend Stan had had enough, and he was ready to take action, so he set out to make a very dubious transaction. He called up a nice young lad who worked as a handyman. He was as nice as can be, and it just so turns out, that handyman was me. I sat across from Stan at a table beneath a tamarack tree, in a spot we knew nobody else would see. He asked me a question in Chinese, for some reason I could understand. And right there in front of him, I opened up my suitcase filled with sand. "Yup," I said. My work had begun, for I had some very serious work to be done. I burst into the classroom and got to see the look on his face as I knocked him out cold with my sand-filled briefcase. I dragged him many miles from the classroom, maybe 10 at the most, until we found ourselves right back at the coast. I carried him through the surf and dumped him in the ocean blue, where very soon he would resurface and start anew.